Oh, hi. How you doing? It's Peter Coffin. I was just in Chicagoland doing a workshop with CPI. I'm in the middle of editing all of the footage, and, I have a presentation for you. So here's the rub. This is a presentation that I am working on with Fandom. This is not the final presentation. In fact, this is workshopping the presentation, literally at a workshop. So it's on Fandom, which is the basis of the book I'm working on, but also very much kind of one of the key problems I see in, actually changing things in the world. Like I said, this is the first time I've run through the workshop with people. I already know a lot of things I'm going to change, a lot of things I intend to expound upon that I didn't hear. I got a lot of feedback, both in real time. Because of the workshop format, I encouraged people to speak up if they had a thought or a question or anything. And I encourage you to do the exact same thing, especially with questions, what you'd like me to go into deeper, et cetera, because this is ultimately a workshop / presentation. I want to be able to go around and give anywhere and have people get it. It's called Building a Movement, Not a Fandom, and it is about pretty much the central problem of organizing today. So I'm not going to take up a lot of time. I'm not going to do the spiel after. I would appreciate likes, comments, subscriptions, money me at patreon.com/PeterCoffin. But without further ado, here is my work in progress presentation.
Building a movement, not a fandom. The problem with that is, of course, what is fandom? So I want to ask the room what people think when they hear the word fandom.
Idolizing people like Elon Musk.
That is fandom, yes.
Obsessed.
Yeah, obsession, fanaticism, yeah.
Maybe buying consumer products with their face on it or something.
Yes, exactly. Were you who mentioned The Mandalorian?
Well, earlier.
Yeah. Like, I love Star Wars. That's a fandom. Like, a lot of the time when people talk about fandom, it's talking about like a pop culture thing, like an admiration for something oriented in pop culture. But what I want to say is that it goes well beyond that. It creates a serf-like dependency. Like a lot of people say things like we're in neo-feudalism right now, we're all in little fiefdoms. That's fandom. That's we exist in a paradigm where a lot of our identity and community is supplanted by these consumer market segments that I call fandoms. I'm not sure everyone would agree with the way that I characterize, because I'm sure some people would say, well, that's not that. That's not. This is a political thing. But Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has a fandom. Bernie Sanders has a fandom. Trump has a fandom. Like, these are in every single way. I was just talking about how Trump is doing stand-up comedy on stage. He's a comedian in a lot of ways, and there's a lot of people who like him just because he sounds funny, not necessarily even for any economic policy of his.
It sounds like influencers. It's like what an influencer used to be, something, and now it's more like fandom.
Yeah, it's people who cultivate, in the terms of an influencer or Trump or these types of people, it's people who cultivate a following, and that following consumes them. So I break down fandom into two things. The first thing I call cultivated identity, and the second thing I call commodified community. Now, cultivated identity, it's not an internally created identity. It's not something you say, I am this. It is something that is externally created. Market forces, pressures, social situations encourage you to adopt what I assert a commodity at the center of your identity. It may not be your entire identity, but it's at the center of who you are on some level. And like I opened up asking about sort of if anybody thought about it like the Star Wars or any of that stuff, because it's very similar to consuming Star Wars. It's very similar to going to the latest Marvel movie. It's very similar to that stuff, except for it's everything. People are consuming the influencer, they're consuming the thing, viewing this person as something I am consuming, or this political movement as something I am consuming, and that defines me in some way. The next thing, the commodified community element of it, is you create a situation that produces all of these types of people. Where do they go? Like, where's the love for them? It's the community. And when I say the community, I don't mean an actual community. I mean a sort of thing that apes some of the dynamics of a community. And again, it's part of this following of the commodity.
Comment that
Sure.
I was telling him my background is market research and analysis, and the goal was to, help Coca-Cola, become ubiquitous, right? But, making it a fandom, finding your target and your market. And
a market segment is a fandom.
Yeah.
Like, that's really what it is, except for it's also a social ideology. Like, we are so downstream of the capitalist way that a market works that our social bonds are often formed over our enthusiasm for a thing, as opposed to where 100 years ago you would have a community built around, I go to a job, I see these people every day, I have the same proximity, job, your neighbors. A lot of religion is very much that. And I dichotomize fandom from religion quite a bit. Actually, there's a lot of people who say, like, these people, it's like they're in a religion. I mean, on the surface, it can look like that. And that's also why I'm bringing up serfs. It apes the same kinds of dependencies, except for it's different. So with a serf, they're dependent on the Lord because the Lord owns the land. The serf has to produce on the land to get their share of whatever they're making. It's a more material dependency.
Right. It's like an emotional dependency.
Yeah, you're exactly, like, I even have that written here. We are in a world where a lot of, I don't want to say all of our material needs are handled, because they're obviously not, but a lot of things that we didn't have in feudalism are there. I was just on the plane coming here, and I talked to a woman who was in marketing the entire flight here, and I had no intention of talking to her. I don't know that she had any intention of talking to me, but she said something at the beginning of the thing and just got us talking. And the whole flight we talked about how community has been hollowed out and we just don't have anything. And it was because, like, I think both of us recognized there's no social norm to talk to a stranger that you're sitting next to on the plane anymore. That's what we live in now. They put us in these little bubbles, these little silos, a lot of different terms for it. But we, as a social species, our as Caleb has put it, the entire ways, our entire history of society, it is based around interacting with other things.
Boy, we're hardwired to want to belong.
Yes, exactly. And this gives people a place to belong, even though I'd argue it's not really that. Taking those instincts and making them into, you become a consumer advocate for either Star Wars or Kamala Harris or communism. In all seriousness, most of our communities prior to this era have been based on material interest in some way. Like, you might not like everybody in the community, but, like, your neighbors are your neighbor. Your neighborhood is your neighborhood. You want your neighborhood to be as good as it can be because that's your life. That's where you live. That's just not there anymore either. I haven't even introduced myself to my neighbors. I moved a couple of months ago. I haven't done it because socially, that makes it look like I'm a registered sex offender. If I start knocking on every door, well, no, really think about it. You start knocking on every door and saying, "My name's Peter Coffin. I just moved in the neighborhood." That's a good idea. I think the peach pie might be a good idea. So anyway, it's not as normal nowadays anyway to do that. I would say the further south you go, it is actually a little more normal though. But it's everything's headed in this direction. So can socialism, communism, or Marxism be phantom? Essentially, when you overshadow the actual point of the thing you're talking about by superficial engagement and identity markers, like the idea of my communism that I like on the internet is to have more people know about my communism that I like on the internet and join the Discord and blah, blah, blah. The people who agree with me and like the thing that I like, they're the good people, and everybody else is to be argued with. Like you see symbolic adaptation, like symbols, jargon, shibboleth, stuff that it marks you as in the in-group. That is more important than, let's say, demonstrating something, doing a disruption of some like politician's thing, doing something like the Trump campaign that was just done from CPI in front of the Trump Tower. That's actually like speaking a demand to power. It's recognizing what power is and attempting to exert some will on it. We're fundamentally different if we are actually doing what Lenin said to do. If we are actually going to the masses, we are building some kind of power and communal relationships with people. This is not that. This is, I want everybody to consume. I want people to have the same taste as me. And that's really the problem here. We turn into fans of communism as opposed to people who are attempting to change things in the world. And then, of course, once you have enough of that, you get into merchandising. We can talk about the RCA and merchandising. That place basically has uniform. They've got the red shirts with the hammer and sickle. They're always walking around with the flags. Huge mass of like 75 people, all dressed exactly the same. Those people are certainly rebelling against something, aren't they? I think probably when I started thinking about this, not necessarily in these terms, but when I was a teenager, and I noticed that like I liked metal, but I didn't dress like I liked metal.
Right.
And I was like, wait, these people are like yelling at the conformists for how bad they are, but they're all dressed in a uniform.
Right.
They literally all look the same, and they say the same things and they act the same way. They're shopping at the same store. That's what they're doing. That's really all they're doing. They're shopping at the same store. So what it ends up doing is it creates these, like I said, commodified communities that are essentially consumer advocacy groups. And as consumer advocacy groups, you're attempting to get the most people to like your communism. You're telling more and more people about it. If they say something that contradicts it, they're on the other side. They're bad. We don't want to talk to them anymore. I'm better than them because I am the biggest fan, blah, blah, blah. And in that respect, it's also, when I say commodified community, that community is now a perfect thing to sell as data. You have a highly targeted group of people.
You know, I think that
Is somebody okay in there? Of course it's Caleb.
When you mentioned about community and stuff,
Yeah.
like how you don't talk to people, I was thinking of my old neighborhood because it was like gentrified, and it's just people are constantly moving, and you don't see faces a lot.
Yeah.
That's why I think that's the reason why people are.
The blinds are down.
Yeah, they have to. I think people are just having to start all over in a community, and it's like debilitating. It's like I have
Absolutely.
to start all over. I have to say hi again, and move again, and do this and that. And I also believe that there's COVID that changed people's lives.
Absolutely. COVID was one of the primary
I
things.
noticed myself, my communication skills was terrible. Like I was nervous to see people. Like I was anxious, and then like being a parent, I don't talk to parents. I
Yeah.
don't want, I feel so, like I have to talk. But then like joining CPI, I like learned to talk to people, and it made me improve my social skills. So that's why I like to kind of motivate younger people
Yes.
to like speak and just don't be nervous. You're gonna make mistakes, fall and get up again. So it's like one of those things, like we don't train that much the social skills aspect of that.
That's basically what I'm trying to do right now.
Yeah,
I'm basically trying not to fall.
Right, it's hard, but I fall to that too. And I don't wanna.
Yeah. It's tough.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, I talk well, but
Right.
also at the very same time, I'm experiencing all of that.
Right.
Like I'm up here going, I hope I don't say anything stupid. And then I said the sex offender thing. Oops. Yeah.
I wanted to share an insight that, like, on one hand, I learned to be a teacher and subjected, but then we go out in the world and they teach us to think of yourself as a producer or as a business, or
Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you the number one thing. If you ask kids what they want to be now, it's a YouTuber or a TikToker. And that's essentially you need to make yourself the business. You need to get yourself a fandom.
Get a lot of likes
Like,
and
Here's the thing. I have been on YouTube since 2006, and I was not an intelligent, smart person saying all of the expert words back then, and I hope I'm not now. But
You were back then, or you're
no, I wasn't. I never was. But I was a comedian. When I was doing comedy, I had a following. It even had a name. They named themselves the Peterheads, which is a joke on dickhead, obviously. But yeah, it's not cute. You thought it was cute. It's not. Essentially, I learned a lot of this stuff just by being a YouTuber and being kind of weirded out by stuff like that. Like, I don't know why people are naming themselves after me. I don't get that. That's a strange thing to me. I'm not trying to make them do that. But as I'm figuring out, like, oh, well, this is something that makes them do that, I stopped doing that thing. And then I stopped having people watch me on YouTube. So it's like, fandom is a really important thing of most businesses now because everything is personality driven. If you don't have a fandom for the personality, the business doesn't have exposure.
Yeah.
And that's the difference between a political activist and a fan. The fandom-oriented political activism is about how the person feels after it's done. The end game is them feeling good. Whereas the end game for an actual political activist, and I hate saying actual political activist because really it doesn't matter what words we're saying at all, but the outcome is the thing that matters. Like, we need to do things that actually resolve contradictions, like the mathematical one that Caleb put up. We need to actually attempt to affect change. We need to understand power in order to sort of assert our will on it, or maybe even overthrow it in some way. And if we're not doing those things, we're just a fandom. We're just, because that's the default. That is how this just is. The fragmentation of the market into these smaller and smaller groups. It is a perfect, if you feel like your sense of being and community is based on something that you consume or something that you don't even realize you're consuming, then you become in a smaller and smaller fragment of society. It does become about one person eventually, a bunch of one person. You get meaning from succeeding.
Does anybody have hobbies anymore?
Yeah, well, I mean, this has kind of supplanted the hobby as well as the community and the identity. Like, people did derive a lot of identity from hobbies too. It's just those hobbies weren't specifically designed to control their life. Whereas all of these are, like, our engagement with everything, it's supposed to be on this sort of endless, almost casino-like, have you ever used like an app where the game like has great sounds and it tries to get you to do these little like microtransactions in the apps? Like, it costs 99 cents here to have a little bit more of this, costs a little bit more there to have a little bit more of this. It's in a lot of ways, I think, an attempt to do that with life, but it allows them to control social boundaries in a way that's just much more like pronounced, I think, than we've ever really seen before. Because I know people love to talk about how like my side is right, their side is wrong, etc. That's not new by any means, but there's so many incentives now that are associated with that. You get a community, you feel like you have something, who you are. When you accomplish converting somebody to your side, oh my God, I'm doing the work. I mean, is anybody familiar with the musician Chappelle Roan and what happened maybe a month or so ago with that person? So it's a person who has a very progressive fandom, a very like LGBTQ oriented fandom. And she did an interview in which she said both sides are bad and literally those words about the presidential candidates. And those are just, you are not allowed to say that. You cannot say both sides are bad because then you're the other side in disguise.
Could I?
Sure. Yes.
I think this is related to technocracy and transhumanism. You know, these are two ideas that they're scary, but, you know, Whitney Webb talks about it, and and to me, this artificial intelligence, I mean, it seems like technocracy to me, that we're all just kind of in this.
Well, I would say yes, but also anti-technocracy. People who are vehemently against that and are essentially consuming hate for that. Like, if you get into looking at the anti-AI fandom or the it's the same thing, because what it is, it's essentially, you get people who react viscerally to the idea that thing is bad. Like, they go, oh, I don't like that thing. This thing bothers me on a visceral level. There's an identity and a community that figure out some way to plug you right back into all of the market mechanics, all of that. Like, it literally is about like how you feel. If you can feel good for being right about AI or transhumanism or whatever,
It kind of comes and gets you and says, good, come on.
then the guy on Instagram who posts shorts every day about how AI is bad, he can make a bunch of money off you. Because it doesn't have to be Star Wars, it doesn't have to be politics, it doesn't have to be anything. It can be anything. Like, and the opposite of that thing too. It's a dynamic that they've gotten us to adopt, which just completely collapses everything into something that reserves the market. And as it reserves the market, it also justifies capitalism as the thing I get my identity from, the thing, well, not necessarily the thing, but a thing that is underpinning the thing I get my identity from and community from. What's up?
Well,
Say one other thing too, yeah.
one thing that I did have an interesting conversation with a woman who was in Code Pink. Right?
Sure.
I was complaining to her about the left and how dividing it is in the internet cancel culture. And she said that, you know, she was older and she got involved when the anti-Vietnam War movement was going. And she said what she saw as the difference was that at the time of the anti-Vietnam War movement, the movement was very much motivated by a desperate need for the war to end. And that there were a lot of people involved who were just desperate for the war to stop. There was like dead bodies coming home. People were dying. Whereas now it's like we're kind of looking for people to kind of entertain us and give us ideological answers, but there's not a desperation to change things, number one.
Yeah.
And there's also not an understanding that we can change things.
That's, I think, the key.
This problem is that people don't understand that mass movements can actually change the world.
Well, because they think that you consume to change the world. They think that the market simply acquiesces to the demand that you display, which it doesn't. Like, that's not how capitalism works in the large-scale industry era. That's, I mean, it's a different topic, but Marx talked about how supply more or less compels demand because you produce a bunch of things and then you have to produce the demand for those things. It's not that we wait till somebody needs something and go, oh, I've got a great invention for you. It's instead, I have a thing, I want you to buy the thing, here's why you should buy the thing.
Oh, yeah, well, I was just saying, isn't it kind of like tied to like Marx, like alienation, like the way
Absolutely.
humans are alienated from their creativity and stuff?
100%.
You know, they become appendages to the machine, and when whole society becomes subordinated to machinery, but not just machinery, it's product as well.
Yeah,
So it becomes
and media.
media, the commodities.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how the consumerism, especially with mass production.
I think alienation is something that inherently you have to address some way. And I think we've had several different ways of addressing it, so to speak. And I think that they've sort of all coalesced into this. Like you had religion, for instance, which kind of, it helps you with the alienating problems of capitalism, or did at some point. And the thing about religion is people start questioning dogmatic elements of it. And it's not so much that fandom is a lot different from religion, but it's less dogmatic because there's no single set of rules to follow. It's whatever the thing that you like and consume does, until you don't like it anymore, then you cancel it.
And the fandoms become less political over time.
Oh, definitely.
They start out, maybe it's very political, but then after a while it just becomes about the person.
Well, I mean, look at Vosh's content nowadays. Like, is it even political anymore? I don't even know.
Yeah.
Conscious.
Vosh is an internet personality, a socialist. He still makes content, but I don't think it's particularly social. Like, he was talking about like fashion the other day and saying how great his clothes were, and it's like, John?
Yes.
What I was trying to say earlier is that Caleb had mentioned that they don't believe that you can change things anymore.
Yeah.
That's actually become a fandom. Right?
Yeah.
The idea that you can't change anything.
Absolutely.
There's this whole segment on Twitter.
You are right on the right wavelength here.
they agree with us on all the issues, but they're aggressively hostile to the idea that you can change things.
Exactly.
You say, I'm going to try this, to get people who, okay, we know there's a whole bunch of bad people in the establishment.
Sure.
But they're going to be there for a while. We have to force them to do what has to be done to get us out of this crisis. But if you say that that's what we're going to try to do, then you're even worse than that person.
Absolutely.
You're part of this.
Absolutely.
You sell out. You're saying you're going to try to force the government to do something, man. You're bad.
Aggressively.
John, yes, no, it is very much that. But John, that's exactly what you're getting it exactly what I'm saying. Like, I'm really, yes, it sucks so much.
you're kind of on the wavelength of Michelle Swan. Because she takes a lot of heat to the Republicans and violence. But she said, like, it was the vast movement during Nixon that got him to stop the war. It was filling up the airports when Trump made this Muslim ban, and they put pressure on him to stop the Muslim ban. And it's her organization will straight back. You got the $13 blade, you got the $400 million ambulance, you got rent control.
Yeah.
One victory, one little victory at a time. But I know Caleb says that we're on different wavelengths than she is, but she's actually materially accomplishing it.
Right.
I agree. I very much agree.
And then the Democrats go and try to co-opt the great. When we fight, we win.
Yes.
Right.
And here's the thing. I said this during Caleb's presentation. I don't care what we call ourselves. If you're operating rationally, you're eventually going to end up in one place, because you have to end up trying to do something other than the fandom or the consumerism.
Right.
Like, the thing I want everybody to understand this for is because if you are conscious about it, if you are thinking about, like, well, what are we accomplishing here? What is changing by these actions? You're not doing fandom. So I think that is what separates CPI very much from a lot of other groups. And it's why I've stood by it this whole time. We don't think in those terms. We do not think in fandom terms. We don't think, you know what? I'm happy. This is great. The thing that I'm getting out of this is giving me catharsis. And that's it. I will go home and I will sleep well tonight because I'm happy. That's not what CPI is about. And the more we understand the dichotomy, and I'm not going to say that we're ever going to fully understand it, because I'm sure it's more complex than I can even. I've spent more than a decade looking at this thing, and I'm sure I don't understand it entirely. I'm positive I don't understand it entirely.
That goes with what John was saying. No wonder they have such a problem with us, the aggressively hopeless people.
Right,
Like,
right.
Yeah.
You know, because
Well,
we're like, you know,
correct.
God, just let's go.
Well,
and
we're
do something,
optimistic.
you know?
We're optimistic, and we want to actually change things.
Yeah.
We want our actions to have successes, even failures. Like, honestly, having a failure is good because you can take that information
Right.
and you can learn from it.
Right.
And then we systematize the things that work. And that's the difference. That is the difference. We're doing something with some kind of a goal. It may not be the same goal today. Tomorrow we might have smaller things. We might have a larger thing, like next year's big anti-imperialism rally that we're going to do in the summer. But we have something we actually want to accomplish, and we'll work in order to accomplish it. Like, it doesn't necessarily mean that that thing is going to fix everything, but it means we're at least operating not in this mindset that continually plugs us right back into this completely ineffective, pessimistic bullshit life that they're trying to make us lead.
It was like Code Pink, and there was the whole Ukraine conflict.
I would take a
noticed,
picture with
Yeah, literally they were just taking photos, and then they left all the protesters. It was like cold, and I was doing I wanted, like, my mentality was like, okay, that was the CPI that we went to out in February, like 2nd or 9th, when the whole Ukraine, like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And I'm all like, I was all excited, and then it was like, Code Pink was there, and like, literally it's just like, let's take a picture, and we beat the system, and we could go home to our nice houses, and go to sleep. And it's like, I'm seriously, people who are literally, I can't, because it's like, my money is being cut off. I don't get enough, link card anymore. I'm getting, ripped up, and it's like, it's important to me. And it's like, I felt like a failure with, like, I'm thinking we're doing something serious, but it's all fake. So it's like,
then you get there and you realize it's
that's how I go back. Like, it's kind of debilitating and depressive, and like, literally, like, that's how I understand why people go to, like, the conservative circles or something, and then they go far to left, right, or something like that, or something. I don't know.
Two things in response to that. The first is that's specifically why I'm talking about this.
Yeah.
The second thing, I can very intensely remember, I was a big Bernie supporter in 2016, and there were various offshoot politicians that were kind of riding the Bernie movement. And not necessarily because they had any record that indicated they were exactly that, but they were saying things that Bernie Sanders was saying. And of course, we can criticize Bernie Sanders all we want now because we're kind of past that and understand what it was. But at that point, I was saying things like, well, just because somebody's saying this thing doesn't mean it should matter. And that would get Bernie people pissed off at me just because they were saying things that were similar to Bernie Sanders. And that's exactly what these offshoot politicians were taking advantage of. And then also, you know, when you do political activism of any kind, let's say continue using Bernie Sanders as an example. The way that worked was a lot of people kind of bought into healthcare fixes everything, which it doesn't, obviously. But let's say we did get Medicare for all. Let's say we got there and it doesn't fix everything. Everybody becomes disillusioned and it's like, well, why do we even do anything? Like, we have healthcare now, but like, I have all of these other problems and they're still as bad, if not worse, because my money's going in there.
And I was all about the healthcare, but like when Bernie lost and he gave himself away to Biden,
Oh man.
that really like hurt me. Like, I literally got emotional because I literally campaigned for him and I practiced Spanish. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna knock on doors, blah blah blah. Like, I'm out speaking Spanish, trying so hard. I'm like, okay, and then it's like he literally sold himself to Biden. I'm like,
It was like
what
you
the
see
heck?
taking the football away.
Right, and I was
Yeah.
like, so, and then it felt like you get a little crisis moment, like, what am I actually doing with myself?
Get out of it.
And again, we're trying not to do that.
Right.
I've obviously just kind of said everything I intended to say, but that's what's important to me. Like, the thing that matters to me is that I'm involved with something that is actually having an effect. I don't want people to consume better. I don't care if people agree with me. In fact, I know that a large number of people will disagree with me on things even within this organization. I know that when I go out to talk about what our political agenda is, the 4-point program, for instance, I know that when I tell people that, there's going to be a lot of questions about it, and I don't treat them like they're bad because they don't have the answers to them already, and they aren't my answers. Yeah, one more.
I don't necessarily have a comment for this, but I want to say to everybody, I'm sorry I don't contribute a lot. I don't have a lot of insight, but I do appreciate you guys kind of teasing me.
Oh, absolutely. No, we're happy you're here because honestly, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. So, yeah. All right. Well, thanks again, everybody.
I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, we're all learning.
All right, 5 minutes.